and Brian Anderson from Nusantara TV. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon. Thank you and welcome to the webinar program, the Immigration Information Session for the Indonesian Community. This event is brought to you by Indonesian Club Melbourne and the Consulate General of the Republic of Indonesia. To this distinguished guests, Consul General Speaker Tutu Hatunewa, the Public Relation for the Indonesian Club Melbourne, Teti Hutagalung Michelson, President of Indonesian Club, Lucky Kalonta, dan perwakilan dari Victoria, ya, selamat datang. I would like to introduce the two speakers. I'd like to introduce in Bahasa Indonesia, so nanti later on the speaker themselves can introduce themselves in English. Ya, kita kehadiran dua tamu penting dari Departemen Imigrasi, yaitu satu Bapak Red Henkel. Ya, beliau adalah Community License Officer di Department of Home Affairs. Peran beliau adalah mewakili beliau sudah di bidangnya ini sudah lebih dari 30 tahun ya. Jadi dalam bertugas untuk menyampaikan dan mensosialisasikan program-program dan kebijakan dari Departemen Imigrasi adalah sudah mendarah daging seperti ya. Jadi beliau sangat-sangat ahlinya, ada pakarnya di bidang imigrasi. Kemudian ada Miss Linda Pan ya, yang juga adalah seorang Community License Officer di mana beliau bertanggung jawab terhadap komunitas Asia Tenggara, maka Amerika Latin dan Eropa Barat. Ya, dalam perannya beliau bekerja sebagai perwakilan pemerintah Australia dalam mendiskusikan isu-isu seputar imigrasi ya kepada berbagai komunitas masyarakat yang ada di Victoria ini. Oke. Nah, sebelumnya Public Relation to the Indonesian Club Melbourne akan memberikan welcome note ya. Silahkan Ibu Teti.
You for being here with us today. Before we get started, on behalf of Indonesian Club Melbourne, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you who have generously helped us make this information session come together today. I wish to thank you, our Consulate General Republik Indonesia, Ibu Speaker Tutu Hatumewa, for her cooperation, our speakers from the Department of Home Affairs, Mr. Red Henkel, who always opened his office to us and answer our question anytime we need it. And Miss Linda Pan, our host, Buset Magazine editor, Mrs. Winnie Roti, our initiator and facilitator, Mr. Lucky Kalonta, President of Indonesian Club Melbourne, our IT team, Mr. PB Wu, Buset Magazine, and Mr. Brian Anderson from Nusantara TV. We could not have done it without you. So a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. I'm looking forward to your active participation in these sessions over next hour. Back to you, Vinny. Just quick note.
And like Bapak Lucky Kalonta, Mr. Lucky Kalonta, as the President of Indonesian Club Melbourne, to give his opening.
Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ibu Speaker Tutu Hatunewa, Consul General of Republic of Indonesia, Miss Linda Pam dan Red Henkel from Department of Human Affairs, will be taking long story to tell everyone on how this information session can be possible. To cut short our journey to the office of Department of Human Affairs last December 19, Teti, Yuri, Gary, and me went to see Red in the office. And it was a wonderful feeling to come to see you on that day. You let us in and speak everything about immigration. Sitting in one table and face to face with you, it was a miracle for us. Because honestly, it is very hard to get some information from the immigration. We have to queuing to get someone to come and talk to us in the office. Through telephone, it was pathetic to take hours to get an answer. So we thought, well, this is our chance to see and talk to you. And all saying said, grab every chance when you got a chance to do that. As we talk about our need and your expectation, we come to the result that we both need an information session focused on immigration. Victoria and Tasmania wants to hear from you about this important message in this immigration sector. We will hear from you in help to spread this information to all the Indonesians who are living in Melbourne and other cities in Australia. Do not hesitate to answer our questions from us. Contact us if you need information about Indonesia. Say if you want to go private visit or etc. We will help you too. We hope that this session will benefit to both Indonesia, who are living in this beautiful country called Australia, and the Department of Human Affairs goals. We look forward in this information session, and God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Luki. Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to the Indonesia. We would certainly invite Mr. Rex Henkel and Ms. Linda Pan to visit our country once the lockdown has been lifted up. Yeah, it's a beautiful country that we have there. And now I would like to welcome Ibu Spika Tutu Hatudewa, our Consul General for the Republic of Indonesia for Victoria and Tasmania, to deliver her speech.
Ya, terima kasih Bu Vini. Good evening everybody. Pak Luki as the chairperson of the Indonesia Club Melbourne, in Ibu Teti as well, Ibu Vini from Buset magazine, and especially it's a pleasure to me for me to meet Mr. Red Henkel and Miss Linda Fan, despite only through screen virtually, and to everybody. This is truly another good opportunity for us to be engaged with the Indonesian community and engagement from the Indonesian community with the Department of Home Affairs. Since for the last couple of months, since the lockdown, we received so many questions and inquiries from Indonesians living here in Victoria with regard to the traveling to Indonesia and returning back to Australia, including the international students from Indonesia that because of the lockdown and online learning, they have to return back to Indonesia, but expected or wish to come back to Australia once the situation is conducive enough. And this situation, we cannot answer that because that's within the competence or within the mandate of the government of Australia. So I thank Pak Luki Kalonta for the initiative to invite Mr. Red Henkel and Ms. Linda Fan from the Home Affairs Department to speak for us with regard to the immigration regulations or anything about immigration that might be the interest or even benefit for Indonesian living here in Australia, or for the more than 17,000 Indonesian students that's studying here in Victoria. There are also a couple of hundred of Indonesian living in Tasmania, including Indonesian students or international students from Indonesia in Tasmania currently, that I hope that from this session they can get also the benefit. But I also believe that not only about the international travel from Australia to Indonesia and vice versa, but also this session should also benefit for Indonesian living here in Victoria, because I believe that Mr. Red Henkel and Ms. Linda Fan is also dealing with the multicultural aspect of or affairs that will benefit the multicultural community or society here in Victoria. Indonesian community, despite the small number compared to other communities such as maybe India or China, but Indonesian community are very active in contributing to the community in multiculturalism here in Victoria. And for that, we hope that through this session, there can also be some information with regard to the benefit to the community from Home Affairs, if there's any. And with that, I believe from the consulate perspective, that the relationship between people to people or community to community will be the strong and solid foundation for the good bilateral relationship between Australia and Indonesia, and especially between Victoria and Indonesia. And this foundation, the people-to-people relation, will also be the foundation for the good economic relation that after this pandemic, we hope that we will gain more from the economic relation between Indonesia and Australia. With that, again, thank you, Pak Luki, for the initiative, Ibu Fini, and also thank you for Paret and Ibu Linda for the information that will be delivered later on. And hopefully, once everything is conducive, lockdown is lifted, and I have the privilege to meet in person with Mr. Red Henkel, Ibu Linda Fan, and for us all to meet again at the consulate or anywhere else, maybe in the city, in the CBD. Looking forward for that time to come. Terima kasih banyak. Thank you very much. Ibu Fini, silahkan.
Thank you, Bu. Won't be long now. Won't be long now for that cup of coffee in the city. Okay, now we are going straight to the main event. I would like to call upon Ms. Linda Fan to deliver the information. She'll be talking about community engagement section and citizenship and social cohesion group.
Thank you, everyone.
Hello there. If you would like to introduce you.
Hello, can you hear me? Thank you. Well, firstly, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for inviting Red and I to today's session. I started in the community liaison role back in March this year, so it's only been a few months. And as you know, March was when everything we went into lockdown pretty much soon after. So I didn't get to really meet anyone face to face. It's mainly just been on the phone. But it's been really good to be able to see you all today, put a face to your name. So thank you for having us. We've got a little bit to cover. So I hope that after today's session that you get something out of it. And obviously, if there's things that we don't get to cover, or if you have further questions, we're more than happy to take it and follow up for you. Brian, do you mind putting up the presentation for me, please? Great, thank you. So Red and I are from the Community Liaison Engagement section of the department. There's only a few of us, really. There's 5 to cover the whole, all the regions around the world. So it does keep us busy, but so I've got the Southeast Asian nations, I've got South American and and some of the Western European countries. So on a day-to-day basis, it does keep us very busy, but you know, we're always happy to help when you need, so please reach out. Brian, can you please start on the next slide? Thank you. All right, so travel restrictions is something that is affecting us all at the moment. So as you know, there are current restrictions in place for people leaving Australia or coming to Australia. So since March this year, travel restrictions have been in place to prevent foreign nationals from entering Australia unless they have an exemption. It also restricts Australian citizens and permanent residents from leaving Australia, again, unless they have an exemption. So these border exemptions have been one of our most successful measures in slowing the spread of the virus in Australia. And so for Australians and permanent residents, this means that you cannot leave Australia unless you apply to the Commissioner of the Border Force, the Australian Border Force, for an exemption. And at the moment, this can be done via our online portal. So it's available via our website, Department of Home Affairs website. And you must, have one of these reasons in order for your application to be considered. Obviously, there's other reasons that you can apply, but these are the main ones. So if you want to travel outside of Australia, then it has to be part of a response to the COVID-19 outbreak, or your travel is essential for the conduct of critical industries and business. You can also get an exemption if you are going overseas to get urgent medical treatment. That's not available in Australia. If you are travelling for urgent and unavoidable personal business. And the one that we are getting the most applications for is travelling on a compassionate or humanitarian grounds. So with that, each case is different. So if you think that it meets that requirement, please lodge your application, and the department will consider case by case based on the evidence that you provide whether they will grant an exemption. And then the other one is travelling in the national interest. So in order to apply, you have to provide evidence to support your claims, and requests may be finalised without further consideration if you don't provide sufficient information. Obviously, these restrictions don't apply to temporary visa holders. They're free to leave Australia at any time. But you just have to remember that if you leave and you want to come back, then you need to apply for an exemption to come back into the country. So there's a link to our website there on that screen that you can go to find out more information if you would like to know about the exemption process, and also it links you to the portal where you can apply. Next slide, please, Brian. Okay, so at the moment, because of the strict border restrictions, we would recommend that if you don't need to apply for a visa, this is if you're outside of Australia, then perhaps hold off because the department is prioritising applications for travellers that are exempt and require urgent travel. So if you do end up lodging an application, then we would encourage you to apply it online. Obviously, that will be a lot quicker than if you were to lodge a paper-based application. At the moment, you cannot apply for an electronic travel authority while these restrictions are in place because we're not accepting people back into the country. So, yeah. It's important to note that due to COVID, there are disruptions to services. Services may be impacted. These include, overseas panel doctors being not accessible, the English testing facilities not accessible, biometric collections and paper application lodgement centres may be unavailable. So the department is aware that these are the challenges, and therefore we're a little bit more flexible in terms of the assessment of applications, and additional time is provided for these checks to be provided and requested information to be provided. So hopefully it helps, but it's quite difficult at the moment given the current situation. Again, there's the link to the website if you would like more information. Thanks, Brian. Now, for those wanting to come to Australia, there are exemptions in place to facilitate travel. At the moment, only Australian citizens, permanent residents, and their immediate family, and also New Zealand citizens are allowed back into the country. We get asked a lot of questions about when international students can come back to Australia. So the Australian government is committed to a suppression strategy for COVID. So their goal is no community transmission, and then there's that 3-step framework to a COVID-safe Australia. So I'm not sure if you all have seen it, but under this framework, the Australian government will consider allowing international students to come back at step 3. So for Victoria, that's quite a fair few steps away, but other states are looking into pilots, so small pilots, a small cohort of students coming back into the country. And that's, each state and territory are deciding on when and how they're doing that. It's all based on their health advice of their individual state and territory. But once states want to bring those students back in a pilot, then the federal government would assist with things like charter flights to bring them back. But at the moment, obviously, Victoria, there's no talk of a pilot. We've only heard of one in South Australia at this stage. So arrangements for international students to come back will be implemented when it is safe to do so, and it's always the health advice that comes first. So if we encourage students to continue to check our website for any updates, and also students' first point of contact should be their educational provider. They should be able to provide if they are participating in a pilot, or if there's any changes to international students being able to come back. Thanks, Brian. Okay, so if travellers who want to come back to Australia, as I said before, we need an exemption from the Australian Border Force Commissioner. Some of the ways that the exemptions were being granted, it's a pretty long list, but it's quite strict as well. So if you're a non-citizen and you're being invited by an Australian government, state or territory to assist with the COVID response, that's one way you can come back. If you're providing critical or specialist medical services, that's another way. If you have been sponsored by an employer to work in an occupation that's on our priority migration skilled occupation list. Again, the travelling for compassionate and compelling reasons, and these have to be quite compassionate and quite compelling for the department to consider. So when applying, please provide as much detail as you can. That will help help us to determine your application a lot quicker. So each case is unique and considered individually based on the information that's provided in the application and the supporting evidence that's being provided. Applicants will be informed if further information is required, or if the application has been refused, then they'll be advised the reason why. You have to have an exemption before you can book your travels, before you're allowed to come into Australia. And it's important to note that all incoming travellers from abroad will be quarantined in a hotel or at a designated accommodation determined by the state or territory. At the moment, it's 14 days at the port of arrival. And these will be at the traveller's own costs. So that's something to consider when you're applying for an exemption to come back. So states and territories have also placed caps on the number of international arrivals. So at the moment, Melbourne and Hobart are not accepting any international travellers back into the state. Sydney has a limit of 350 passengers per day. Perth is 525 passengers per week. And Brisbane and Adelaide, there's a limit of 500 passenger arrivals per week. And Canberra and Darwin, it's on a case-by-case basis, so they don't have a cap. So the numbers are quite small. It's quite difficult now, even for Australians who are stranded overseas, to be able to come back due to these restrictions. So yeah, it's suffice to say it is very difficult at the moment to come home or even to come to Australia. Thanks, Brian. All right, so just leaving travel restrictions aside, we're going to move on to the Migrant English program. So a couple of weeks ago, 28th of August, Minister Alan Tudge announced that the Australian government is making it easier for migrants to improve their English language skills under the Adult Migrant English program, so the AMEP. So the key changes will be removing the cap that limits free English tuition. So at the moment it's 510 hours. Removing this cap means that migrants can undertake English language classes until they are competent. And also the threshold, whereas at the moment it's reaching a level of functional English, this will be extended to vocational English. So you can undertake it until you reach a vocational level. The change also means a removal of the time limits for enrolling, commencing and completing your tuition. We'll be interested to hear if anyone has a view on that at all. If you have positive, negative, we'd love to hear from you because we know that better English language skills improve a person's chance of getting a job. They're more likely to be involved in community and participate in the day-to-day life within Australia. So it's important that that's available. And we know that there's only 13% of those who don't have English skills are employed, compared to 62% of those who speak English well. So the government sees this as very important and spends around $250 million a year on English language programs to support about 60,000 enrolments a year. Currently, people only complete about 300 hours out of the 510. And then only about 21% leave with a functional level of English. So that's a bit of a concern. So under these changes, the classes are not compulsory and there's no new requirements to be tested or to achieve a certain level of English. So you just undertake it until you feel that you're, you're competent or that you're happy with the level of English that you've achieved. As we know, Australia is a very multicultural country. We now have around 30% of Australians who are born overseas. So, so hopefully these changes will mean that more migrants will be able to access English tuition for a longer period of time and until they reach a higher level of proficiency. Thanks, Brian. So other changes that's been announced by Minister Tudge is there are new policy measures to support the recovery of Australia's international education sector. So we realise that the international education sector is very important for the country. And so Minister Touch has announced that one of the measures to support graduates who've been affected by COVID is to allow them to apply for and be granted a temporary graduate visa outside of Australia. So they'll still have to meet all other eligibility requirements, but they can be learning offshore online, and that will count towards their onshore 2-year study requirements. And the other change is that students have up to 12 months after they've finished their course to apply for a temporary graduate visa. Another change that he announced was to introduce that if international students who are affected by COVID lodge a subsequent visa application, then they won't be charged for that application. So that's another change. The government will commence granting student visas lodged outside of Australia. So students can lodge their visas, have it approved, and then as soon as the border opens, they'll be welcomed back into the country. So that's something that they can do. And yeah, so there's additional time that will be given to applicants to provide the English results where COVID has disrupted access to these services. Thanks, Brian. So one of the other changes during COVID has been the relaxation of work rights. So due to this pandemic, the Australian government has relaxed some of the work limitations to allow international students in specified industries to work more hours. So these include international nurses, international student nurses, and other aged care workers who are currently working in aged care facilities, home care providers, and other healthcare workers. So they can work more than 40 hours a fortnight. Similarly, international students currently working for registered disability service providers can also work more than 40 hours a fortnight. Those international student nurses and students studying relevant medical courses and undertaking efforts against COVID can also have more than 40 hours of work. So I'll stop there. I'll hand it over to Rhett, and at the end, if you have any questions, then we're happy to provide an answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. That was terrific. So Brian, can we move on to the next slide, please? So, excuse me. So, so the COVID has had a very, very big impact on the Australian economy. And, you know, there's a large number of people in Australia on temporary visas, the temporary skilled shortage visas, for example, also international student visas. And look, there's been a lot of pressure that the Australian government should provide them with some level of support if they've been in a situation where they can't work, they can't support themselves, that sort of thing. Look, basically the government has decided not to extend job seeker and job keeper to people on temporary visas, whether it's people on the temporary skills shortage visa or international students or working holiday visas, that sort of thing. It's, I suppose, basically because there are so many Australians who are on JobKeeper and JobSeeker that are, they're paying out an awful lot of money anyhow. But look, we've been advised that, and this was in a speech that our Minister Alan Tudge made on the 4th of April, that employers who might employ people on temporary skills shortage visas, they can decide to reduce the hours of their workers. And so, for example, they could reduce people on a temporary skills shortage visa down to 2 or 3 days a week, so that that would assist the business a great deal, and it will still give people on those visas some money to live on in the meantime. In some cases, businesses may need to stand people down completely. That is, not provide them with any work or income, but maybe that might be just for a short period until the business can get going again. Businesses can do that, and visas don't have to be cancelled or anything like that. If people are laid off, that is, they're no longer employed by the business, then they've got 60 days to find another employer to sponsor them, or they need to look to see if it's possible for them to depart Australia. Brian, could we move on to the next slide, please? So for these people who are who may be in financial hardship, and they're not able to access JobKeeper or JobSeeker, the Australian government's provided $50 million to the Australian Red Cross, so that they can provide financial assistance. You can sort of see the link I've got there from the Red Cross. So if people go to that link and access it, they'll find information about getting that assistance from the Red Cross. But if people are in a lot of trouble financially, on the Department of Social Services website, that's the second link there, it's possible to get emergency relief. So if people access that link, what they'll find is that if they put in their postcode or suburb, it will list the charities in that area that are prepared to provide emergency relief. And this can be food, it can be stuff like soap and that sort of thing. Perhaps clothes, I'm not sure, but it's a place where people can try and get that sort of assistance. The education providers are providing assistance also to international students who are facing hardship. Sometimes they're providing grants or perhaps rental assistance or reduced fees. The Victorian government has gone to a lot of trouble to help international students through the Study Melbourne agency. And for example, they had a one-off grant. I can't remember how much it was, $1,200, maybe $1,500, that if people were in financial assistance, they could obtain. So if people haven't had access to that grant yet, they could inquire about that via Study Melbourne. All right, thank you, Brian. So now we're just going to move on to the general information about immigration, which are just questions that we've been asked about. And look, can I say, we're having a lot of discussions in our office about having economic recovery after the pandemic's under control. And there's two big things from an immigration perspective that the government is very keen to pursue. One is having international students return to Australia and study. It's an important economic driver. It's I always thought it was the third biggest export industry, but I saw something the other day which said it was the fourth biggest. That's still pretty big. So as soon as possible after the pandemic is under control, the government will be looking to have international students return to Australia and study. And the other thing is that migration just generally is seen as a very important economic driver for the Australian economy. You know, every family that migrates to Australia comes here and they will rent a house or buy a house, and they'll buy a car. They'll buy a household full of goods and you know, such as furniture and stuff that people use in the kitchen and all this sort of thing. And they will they'll work and they'll be earning income that they'll spend on other goods and services. And this is all considered very important economic driver, and and the Australian government considers that for every 10 migrants, it creates 11 jobs. So so in the future, when we're able to lift the travel restrictions, the government will do so, and it will be promoting immigration again. So anyway, let's get on with what we've got on the slide. So we were asked, sorry, Brian, can we go back one page? Thank you. So look, basically we were asked about how old you needed to be to migrate to Australia. Generally speaking, for skilled visas, you've got to be under the age of 45. If you're over the age of 45, getting an employer-sponsored visa or passing the points test, you can't do it. I suppose the government has this attitude: the younger you are, the more you will work before you decide to retire, and therefore the more you will benefit Australia. So so they've set this age limit at 45. However, there are a whole series of visas, including say a spouse visa or a partner visa, where it doesn't matter how old you are. People find love at all sorts of ages. And there are these other visas, the parent visas, that sort of thing. But you can sort of see from the slide that there may be all sorts of other impediments to people getting those visas, waiting times, and also the cost of them. All right, thank you, Brian. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so another question that we were asked about was scams. And look, what I put in the slide is unsolicited telephone calls, but look, I get unsolicited emails, I get unsolicited text messages. I think it just seems to be something that people get these days, and I would be very cautious about giving any of these unsolicited email or telephone calls any money. And look, you can see what we've put in the slide. It is very unlikely that anyone from the department would ring you up and threaten to take your permanent residence off you or anything like this because you may have breached some law. And however, if you paid them some money, this would sort this whole problem out. That's not the way the Australian government works. And if you should get a telephone call like this, I would say to you, just hang up. Don't even talk to them. Look, if you are a visa applicant and your visa's being processed, on occasion, the processing officer may contact you for further information. And on occasion, well, when I used to be a case officer, I used to ring people up to try and speed it all up. But look, I think generally speaking, people send emails. You know, ordinary case officers don't have anything to do with money. You pay for your visa application up front when you're making your application. You don't pay it halfway through. You don't pay it at the end to get a visa label put in your passport. So if anyone's trying to ask you for that sort of thing, it's probably a scam. Similarly, if you're an Australian citizen, it's very difficult to lose that status. So don't believe anyone who says that that's going to happen. If you're a permanent resident, look, it is possible if you are a criminal and you do terrible things and you are locked up for a long time in jail, that the government could look at cancelling your visa. But look, it's, you know, you'd have to do something pretty terrible. So you can lose your status if you're a permanent resident and you go offshore for more than 5 years or more than the life of your resident return visa. But look, it's quite possible to get your resident return visa back by making an application, providing you meet the requirements. You can see I've put a couple of links if you receive or you experience a scam attempt that I would suggest that you report it to. So thank you, Brian. There we are. So another question we received was what's involved in getting a resident return visa. That's a subclass 155 or 157. So if you're an Australian citizen, you do not need a resident return visa. You should just obtain a passport, an Australian passport, if you want to travel overseas. However, lots of people, including people from Indonesia, often choose not to become an Australian citizen and remain a permanent resident, which is perfectly fine. You can remain a permanent resident for the rest of your life. And lots of people, including people from Indonesia, do that because they want to maintain their citizenship status with Indonesia. And Indonesia's a country like Australia, where if you take up another country's citizenship after you've taken, well, if you're an Australian citizen and you take up another citizenship, you lose your Australian citizenship. Indonesia's another country like that. So many people choose to remain a permanent resident. So you do not need a resident return visa if you're not intending to travel overseas. It's like a passport. You don't need to have a current passport if you have no intention of traveling overseas. But if you do want to travel overseas, it's a good idea to have a current passport and a resident return visa. And a resident return visa is a lot like a passport in that it has a finite life. Passports generally have a 10-year life, where resident return visas generally have a 5-year life. So every time you apply for a new resident return visa, the test is how much time in the past 5 years cumulatively have you spent in Australia. And provided you've spent more than 2 years out of the past 5 years or 730 days, you will always get another 5-year resident return visa. I've put the cost up, and you can see that it's a lot cheaper if you apply online. The department really loves people applying online. Probably pretty soon they'll say that people can't make a paper application. So now if people are not confident using computers, of course they can continue to make paper applications, but they'll be slower to process. And so look, if you're not confident with computers, it is usually best to find one of your younger relatives. I find younger relatives very helpful, and get one of them to make an application for you. So, all right, and look, I've put the link at the bottom of the page. All right, thank you, Brian. Let's move on. Look, everyone, we thought we might take some questions at the end about these issues. So if everyone doesn't mind just waiting until the end, Linda and I will make ourselves available to answer any questions you've got. All right, next slide is how can you obtain permanent residence in Australia? There's quite a number of ways to do it. You can see I've listed them there. But look, really, most people, or most permanent visas, 2/3 of permanent visas are for skilled visas and for the families of skilled visa applicants. About 1/3 of them are family visas, and most of those are for partner visas or spouse visas. There is a small number of other family visas, such as child visas or last remaining relatives or carer visas, but they're fairly small numbers. And I have got a slide coming up which will demonstrate all this. If you look at the last dot point, I've said most permanent visas are granted to skilled applicants, that is employer-sponsored or people who pass the points test. And generally speaking, those people are usually professional or tradespersons. Australia is always looking for skilled migrants. So it can be quite difficult to migrate to Australia if you're not a professional or a tradesperson. All right, thank you, Brian. So, yeah, look, this slide is taken from one of our annual reports a couple of years ago. And what I wanted to demonstrate with it was, so in that migration year, and the migration year is the same as the financial year. So it's always from the 1st of July to the 30th of June every year. But in that migration year, 162,417 permanent visas were granted, which is pretty typical. Look, on top of that, about 15,000 refugee visas were granted, but refugee visas counted separately. Most recently, we've been granting nearly 19,000 refugee visas, but generally speaking, we normally grant around about 160,000 permanent visas to skilled migrants and family migrants. And you can see immediately below that it says 111,099 visas were granted to skilled migrants, of which about half were employer sponsored and the other half were points tested visas. Immediately below that, you can see 47,732 visas were granted to family visa applicants. Most of them are spouse visas or partner visas. And you can see how many were granted to children and special eligibility. So, all right, thank you, Brian. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so in recent times, there's been a lot of discussion about pressure on our big cities, Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane and Perth in the main, I suppose. And the government has come up with this these new regional visas to try to encourage new migrants to think about going and living outside of the big cities, like in Victoria. For example, people could go and live in Geelong or Ballarat, Bendigo, Mildura, Shepparton. These are all cities that are growing quite strongly and are looking for migrants to move there. And so there are these new visas which have significant concessions. Basically, that means they're generally a lot easier to get than the ordinary mainstream visas, which you could use to migrate to say, Melbourne or Sydney. So these visas are what we call, these new visas, the skilled work regional and the skilled employer sponsored regional. They're both what we call provisional visas. And what a provisional visa is it's a visa that will lead to a permanent visa if you meet the requirements for the permanent visa. So it's another, provisional is another name for temporary visa, but temporary visas don't necessarily lead to permanent visas, whereas provisional visas will if people do the right thing. So both these provisional visas, one is a visa that requires passing the points test, but also includes being nominated by a state or territory government or an eligible family member. And the other visa is an employer-sponsored visa for working in a regional area. Both of those are 5-year visas, and the main requirements to get the permanent visa will be to go and live in a regional area for 3 years and earn more than 53,900 for those 3 years while you're living in the regional area. Provided you meet those requirements and you meet health and character, all the usual requirements for a visa, you will get a 191 permanent visa. Look, these are good visas to think about, and you can see that once the travel restrictions are lifted, we'll probably go back to granting 23,000 of these visas every year, which is a pretty significant number. You can see the links to those visas. I'd encourage you to have a look at them. All right, thank you, Brian. And this slide is just about what is regional. So for those visas, so basically everywhere in Australia except for Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane is regional. So cities like Adelaide and Perth and Hobart and Darwin and Canberra are regional. In Victoria, as I've mentioned, cities like Geelong, Shepparton, Ballarat, Bendigo and Mildura are regional. So look, it's a fair bit of Australia, so it's probably a good thing to think about those visas. All right, thank you, Brian. All right, we're nearly finished. So the last visas we were going to talk about are the work and holiday visa. Indonesians can apply for a work and holiday visa, a subclass 462. It's a 1-year visa, and it allows people to come to Australia and work to subsidise their holiday here. We're basically saying at the moment with the travel restrictions, it's probably something that people don't want to do. The program is open, but until the travel restrictions are lifted, people aren't going to be able to come to Australia even if they can get a visa. But look, if you have a look at the third dot point down, you can see in the current program year, we were going to grant 4,100 work and holiday visas to Indonesians, and anyhow, you can see the requirements to get a visa. Indonesians need to have a tertiary qualification, have completed 2 years of undergraduate study. They need to have a degree, a graduate degree, or a diploma. They need to demonstrate they have functional English. Usually people do the IELTS test. So the score for functional English is 4.5 out of 9. They've got to have a letter of support from the Indonesian government, and usually we're looking to see that they've got at least $5,000 to support themselves initially until they can find some work. So can we move on to the next slide, please, Brian? All right, so as I said with the previous slide, it's generally a 1-year visa, but if you do work in a regional area and it is specified work, it's quite possible to get a second work and holiday visa, and since July last year, it's possible to get a third work and holiday visa. I think this is because a lot of our farmers are saying that they really need work and holiday makers and working holiday makers from other countries to come and help them harvest and fruit pick. But you can see that there's lots of other industries you can work in to get the second and third visa. So it's pretty good option. You know, you can come and spend 3 years in Australia. Look, when I was a young man, which wasn't very long ago, you could tell, I spent 2 years in the UK on a working holiday visa, and it was a tremendous experience. So I would recommend it. But of course, it's all dependent on the Australian government lifting the travel restrictions. All right, let's go to the next slide, which will be question time. And now, Lukey sent us, oh, there they are. Lukey sent us a series of questions that we agreed to answer. I'm doing question 1. So look, so the person's asking, their wife passed away, and since then he's met another person who he has married, who has come to Australia and is in Australia on a tourist visa, and she's even applied for an extension for her tourist visa or visitor visa. And what he's asking is it possible for her to apply for a partner visa? And yes, the answer is yes, it is possible. Look, with visitor visas, what's important is whether there is a no further stay condition attached to the visa. And look, we have a system called the Visa Entitlement Verification Online System, or VIVO system. You can always go into VIVO and have a look at it and see what conditions are attached to your visa. Provided there's no further stay condition on the visa, then people can apply for further visas, including a spouse visa. So in this case, it'd be a subclass 820 partner visa, which is the provisional visa. Again, as I said earlier, a provisional visa is something that will lead to a permanent visa, provided all the requirements are met for the permanent visa. So the 820 is basically a 2-year provisional visa. This is so that before people get the permanent visa, which is a subclass 801, people demonstrate that they're living normally as husband and wife, and also in a de facto situation, if that's the way they prefer to live, as long as they demonstrate that they've lived for 2 years, they will get the subclass 801 visa. So, and look, while they're waiting for the 820 visa to be processed, what happens every time you apply for a new visa is that you are automatically granted a bridging visa A, which will have all the same conditions as your previous visa, and it will stay valid and will keep you lawful for as long as it takes for the visa application to be processed. So yes, these people could apply for an 820. The husband sponsors the wife. She will get the bridging visa A to keep her lawful while waiting for the 820. Once the 820 is granted, it remains valid until the 801 has been assessed. Look, the only thing I would say is the bad news about this visa is that it is not a cheap visa. I'm not sure exactly what we charge these days, but I think it's something like $7,500. So anyway, all right. Thank you, Brian. Next slide, and Linda's going to answer these questions.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so this question is in relation to bringing someone over to Australia to look after the children. So the applicant or the person is on a sponsored working visa. So there are ways to bring someone to Australia to undertake domestic work. There's a couple of streams. So the first one is the temporary activity visa, the subclass 408, the domestic work for executives. So this visa lets the person come to Australia to do full-time domestic work in the household of a senior foreign executive. So the definition of a senior foreign executive is someone who's either is a national managing director, a deputy national managing director, or state managing director of their sponsor's Australian office. So they have to be quite senior. And that senior executive must hold either a temporary work international relations visa, the subclass 403, privileges and immunity stream, or they have a temporary work skill visa, the subclass 457, or a temporary skill shortage visa, subclass 482. So those are the conditions. The other way that someone can bring a domestic worker to Australia is if they are a diplomat, they're on a diplomatic temporary visa, subclass 995, in which case they can bring someone over on a temporary work international relations visa, which is the subclass 403. So I'm not sure in this instance what visa the person is on, but I'm happy to follow up if they want to provide further information about their visa details, and then we can provide a more detailed and tailored response. Thank you.
Question 4. What happened to question 3? Right. Question 3. Sorry.
They're like in the same page. And it's like the same case, basically. So question 2 is the first one. And yeah, the third question is the one at the bottom. So it's basically like the same person asking 2 questions.
Okay. Righto. Look, one of the questions was if people wanted to bring their parents over to look after the children, did they have to pay them? And our answer is no, they do not need to pay their parents. If they came here on one of the either a visitor visa for families or a sponsored temporary parent visa, or if they came on one of the parent permanent visas. There's no requirement for families to pay their parents to look after the children. So, all right. Shall we go to question 4? Okay. Look, So this question's about whether people are able to retire to another country such as Indonesia, and will they be able to have their age pension paid to them in Indonesia? Look, unfortunately, we can't answer that question. I've sent Lukey a link to the Centrelink email address that these sort of questions can be sent to. And I hope Lukey's able to circulate that email address. However, the question about whether someone moves back to Indonesia for good, whether they'll lose their permanent residence for Australia, yes, they will. Generally speaking, resident return visas have a 5-year life. So you could go back to Indonesia for up to 5 years without losing your permanent residence. You may find you go back to Indonesia, you don't like it, you'd rather come back to Australia. Provided you do before your resident return visa runs out or ceases, you will maintain your permanent residence. But generally speaking, if you're not living in Australia, you will lose your permanent residence. And so it basically has a 5-year time period. And so what's the other question? If I can't get... yeah, look, so with the second question, again, I would say should inquire with Centrelink via the email address that we've provided, Lukey. So thank you very much. Let's go to question 5, which Linda's going to answer.
Okay, thank you. So this question relates to permanent resident, someone on a permanent resident visa, and why is the visa extended for a year and not the full 5 years? Unfortunately, these are the current requirements put in place by the government. So permanent residents must meet residence requirements of the visa, which means that, I think Rhett touched on that earlier, that they must live in Australia for 2 out of the 5 years or the 730 days. And then if they can't meet that requirement, then they will be issued with a maximum of 12 months travel validity if they can demonstrate substantial ties that benefits Australia. So these could include if they've got business ties, cultural ties, employment ties, and or personal ties. So yes, it's not something that that we can answer. It's a requirement that the department has put in place, and unfortunately that's the way it is at the moment. And then again with the fees, yeah, it's the same amount of fees whether you're applying for a 1 year or 5 year. So these are prescribed visa charges. These costs do change from time to time, but at the moment they're the same for both a 1 year and a 5 year. So apologies, I can't give more than that. Although, you know, it's yeah, it's a little bit difficult when you want to live overseas for longer, but you have to keep coming back. So, all right. What question are we up next?
I think we're up to question 7, which I'm going to answer.
Yeah.
So there's so look, there's a lot of people who are in Australia at the moment, either on student visas or visitor visas, and they're hoping, many people prefer to stay in Australia. They think it's safer. than going overseas where the pandemic might be worse. So look, we quite understand that, and and we are getting a lot of visa applications, subclass 600 visitor visa applications, but it's also possible to apply for a subclass 408 visa if you have the special skills that we need for the pandemic. You know, for example, you're a nurse or a doctor or some sort of medical specialist that, you know, you can really help us with the pandemic in Australia. If this person is a student and they haven't finished their course, they should be able to apply for a new student visa to give them extra time to finish their course. Or if they have finished their course and they've met the requirements of the course and they have studied for 2 years, then they should be able to apply for the temporary graduate visa, the subclass 485 visa, which if they've studied a vocational course will be an 18-month visa, or if they've studied a university degree will be a 2-year visa, and it's possible to get 3 or 4-year temporary graduate visas if they've studied higher degrees. What the government says to everyone is, don't become what we call unlawful. Please retain your lawful status. If nothing else, apply for a subclass 600 visitor visa to retain your lawful status while you're still in Australia. We have transferred a lot of our staff to processing those applications. Just like any other visa, you will get a bridging visa A to keep you lawful while the application's being processed. So, you know, please apply for some other visa to retain your lawful status. All right. And if you have to go back to Indonesia, how soon would you be able to return to Australia? Well, basically, you'd have to wait until the government lifted the travel restrictions, and or whether you were returning on a student visa, whether you could become part of a pilot to return to Australia. All right, okay. Shall we go to question 8, which Linda's going to answer?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a specific case. So we have forwarded the details to our visa processing area. So we've made representations on behalf of this person. Hopefully that has brought the case to their attention. But we're not privy to that process, so they won't disclose because it's confidential information, but just know that we have done what we can. So hopefully the applicant will hear a positive outcome. But in terms of the questions about how long it takes to approve, I did pose this question to our visa processing centre, and they said it is longer during COVID time, but again, they're assessing it as quickly as they can, but there is no definite timeframes that they can give me because each case is different that they're assessing. What we can say though is that applicants should make sure that their applications are as complete as possible with all substantiating evidence and information attached so that it makes the assessor's job easier and quicker to assess. So if you think that there is further information that you need to provide, then please do that because it will help expedite that process. Now, if the bridging visa that the person is on has no work rights, what they can do is apply for another one, another bridging visa A with work rights. But this usually means that they have to demonstrate that they're in severe financial hardship. So if that's the situation, then that they can then apply for that BVA or that bridging visa A. But yeah, they have to demonstrate financial hardship. So hopefully that answers that questions, and hopefully this person will get an answer to a response soon. Thank you.
So there's my wonderful joke that I hope everyone finds amusing. Look, thank you very much, Terima kasih. We've basically finished our presentation. I don't know if anyone has any other questions for us. If they do and can give them to us, we're very happy to answer them. So again, thank you very much, Terima kasih. I do know how to say that.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Henkel and Ms. Fan. It was very informative, and thank you for answering those questions. And to everyone else, please, we have an exciting news. There are 5 vouchers totaling of $100 to be given away as a door prize very, very soon. Sebelumnya saya mau mengucapkan terima kasih banyak untuk semua partisipan yang sudah hadir, yang sudah mendengarkan sesi informasi mengenai keimigrasian di Australia ini, terutama untuk diteruskan kepada komunitas Indonesia, di lingkungan pergaulan Bapak Ibu sekalian. Ya, kita akan memasuki babak yang paling menyenangkan, yaitu door prize ya, Bapak Ibu. Akan ada 5 voucher total senilai $100 akan diberikan pada 5 pemenang. Untuk itu saya akan memanggil yang pertama akan dicontohkan oleh Bapak Lucky Kalonta ya, selaku Presiden Indonesian Club Melbourne, untuk mengambil ini bagaimana mengambil namanya ya, Pak Lucky. Tim IT apakah sudah ada ini ya, sudah disiapkan ya untuk dipilih oleh Pak Lucky? Oh, Pak masih mute, bisa di unmute dulu. Belum terdengar ya. Coba mungkin saya bisa bantu unmute bentar. Oke. Diklik. Oke, ya, sudah terdengar.
Nah, dari peserta yang hadir, saya dan Gary baru aja mencabut 1 dan yang lain-lain akan mencabut juga sama. Saya mendapatkan nama Edi Kalestaran sebagai pemenang. Kami akan kirimkan voucher.
Congratulations, Pak Edi. One of the 5 lucky winners for the night goes to Pak Edi Kalestaran. Oke, terima kasih. Dan yang selanjutnya langsung dipilih oleh Ibu Teti Hutagalung Michelson selaku Public Relation dari Indonesian Club Melbourne. Silakan, Bu. Bentar, saya tunggu ya, unmute.
Ida Ayu.
Langsung siap. Ida Ayu, congratulations. Ayu atau Ida?
Yes.
Ayu ya.
Ida Ayu.
Mungkin disorot kali orangnya ya. Yang benar
Disorot.
Nah,
Ya.
ini dia. Loh, nggak ada
Belum
videonya.
kelihatan.
Ah,
Tunggu sebentar.
Oke. Boleh minta videonya?
Oh iya, itu.
Halo,
Ya,
congratulations. You
selamat
are the
malam.
second winner of the night. You
Terima kasih.
berhak untuk atas $20 voucher. Congratulations. Sorry, 20. Ya, betul. Sebelumnya, can I actually ask your opinion in regards to this to tonight's event? Is it helpful for you? And what is your opinion ya, tanggapan ya terhadap informasi informasi ini?
Oke. Good evening. Oke.
Ini tinggal di mana?
Saya tinggal di Bendigo.
Bendigo, oke.
Ya. Jadi, oke. Thank you for the time. And for my opinion for this meeting, it's really helpful for me. So I know how is my process visa, then I can to be patient to waiting until I got the visa. And thank you very much for give me for the time I can join in this meeting.
Oke, terima kasih ya. Berarti sekarang sudah lebih jelas lagi ya, informasinya mengenai visa ya.
Sangat membantu sekali ya. Jadi nggak stres lagi lah.
Nggak stres lagi. Oke, bagus. Jangan stres. Ayo semangat ya. Terus semangat. Oke. Thank you. Dan yang selanjutnya. Oke, yang selanjutnya I would like to call upon Mr. Henkel. Please pick one name other than the co-host and host. You can pick one name and to be the winner of our lucky draw for the night, except the two that have been chosen.
I don't know where I can pick the name from.
You can choose from the participants list if you see on your monitor.
Right. I see.
Yeah.
Hang on. Give me a second. Hang on. How do I get? There. Okay.
Can't be my name.
If I chose Anita Halliday, is that all right?
Sure, of course, Anita Halliday. Congratulations. Let us go to Anita Halliday. Get ready to be spotlighted. There you go. Ibu Anita. Apa kabar? How are you?
Terima kasih.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Bu. Can I ask of your opinion in regards to this event?
It's very good information, a lot of information that I didn't know before. Yeah, and it's very useful. So I can convey to other people that maybe ask me questions about the visas.
Terima kasih banyak, Bu. Terima kasih banyak. Nah, Ibu sendiri ada di Melbourne. Do you live in Melbourne area or?
I live in Melbourne. I live in Docklands.
All right. That's good. That's good. Good air over there. Good weather too. Can enjoy the bright views ya. Oke, terima kasih ya Ibu. Oke, yang selanjutnya. Next up, please. Miss Linda Fan, if you would like to choose a name on your participants list.
Yes. Well, Nani asked the question, so I'm going to choose Nani.
Yay, Nani Raj. Okay, let's go to Nani. Well, she doesn't have the video on. Ibu Nani, apakah di tempat? Are you there, Ibu Nani? Are you there? Lah, kalau nggak ada orangnya bagaimana nih, tim panitia? Kita lanjut aja ya. Oke ya, tetap oke ya? Tetap oke? Iya. Oke, the last one, last but not least, will be chosen by our Consul General, ya kan, Ibu Spika Tutu Hatunewa. Dipersilahkan Bu, minta tolong ya untuk memilih satu nama sebagai pemenang kita yang terakhir. Silakan Bu.
From all the participants, I can choose anybody from the participants?
Except the host and co-hosts.
Okay. I don't know who is this person, but Ibu Sophie.
Ibu Sophie, Ibu Sophie 17th. Oh, there you go. Ibu Sophie, congratulations. Yay. Ibu Sophie berada di mana?
Di Atam.
Wah, Bu, bagaimana keadaannya di sana, Bu?
Alhamdulillah baik, tapi nggak nyaman dengan lockdownnya.
Nggak nyaman. Kita semua nggak nyaman, tetapi bersyukur ya, tetap bersyukur, bahwa kita masih bisa berjumpa walaupun di depan monitor ya kan, berjumpa dengan teman-teman Indonesia yang lain. Bagaimana
Sebenarnya saya mau ada pertanyaan, tapi saya tadi bahasa Inggrisnya kurang ini, saya pengennya ya pakai bahasa Indonesia. Bisa ya?
Iya, boleh Bu.
Saya kan masih di izin visa E. Ini karena mama sakit, sebenarnya saya pengen look after di Indonesia. Tapi kata agennya bisa, tapi mungkin prosesnya ribet ya, karena the situation. Ya sebenarnya saya mau nanyain, kalau memang bisa balik ke Indonesia, apakah nanti harus balik ke sini nunggu border buka atau bisa gimana?
Bisa langsung.
Mohon penjelasannya ya.
Oh gitu, oke.
Terima kasih sebelumnya sama Ibu Mustika. Terima kasih sudah memilih saya dan terima kasih untuk vouchernya.
Terima kasih sudah hadir ya.
Saya akan berusaha untuk hadir karena ini adalah sangat penting untuk kita warga Indonesia di Australia. Meskipun yang sudah permanen atau yang masih proses ataupun students.
Oke, terima kasih banyak Bu.
Terima kasih banyak.
So, Mr. Henkel, there is one more question, if you don't mind. When it got to Ibu Sophie just now, she said she was very thankful of the information of the event. It's very helpful. She has one last question. Sebentar, IT ini suaranya ada yang bocor. Ya, tolong. Nah, she has one last question in regards to her situation right now. She is now holding Bridging A visa. And she would like to know if she go out of the country and visit Indonesia to visit her mom because due to her health condition at the moment, will she be able to return to Australia straight away after she visited her mom, or does she need to wait until the border is open again?
Yeah, look, the short answer is, I would not be departing Australia at the moment, unless it's a really desperate situation, because she'd probably have a pretty tough time trying to get back. And look, what she'd need to do is she'd need to apply for what's called a Bridging Visa B. Bridging Visa A allows people to remain in Australia while their visa application's being processed. But if they want to travel overseas, they've got to obtain a Bridging Visa B. But look, as I said, the travel restrictions are so tough at the moment. She may find that she isn't able to return to Australia for as long as they remain, which could be a year, could be 2 years. We're just not sure at this point. So.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Sophie. Seperti yang dikatakan tadi oleh Bapak Red Henkel ya, pada saat ini sebaiknya tidak keluar dari Australia karena akan menemui kesulitan ketika hendak kembali ke Australia nantinya. Ya, kecuali keadaannya sangat-sangat super mendesak ya Bu. Dan ini sampai ya ini karena ya situasi pada saat ini yang saya harap semua juga mengerti. Ini aturan ini diadakan untuk kepentingan bersama juga. Dan apabila pun Ibu harus pergi ke Indonesia, pulang ke Indonesia, maka disarankan untuk mengambil bridging visa B, ya, yang B Bravo, karena bridging visa A itu sebetulnya untuk visa untuk menunggu pemrosesan visa lainnya gitu kan ya Bu. Jadi untuk bisa keluar dan kembali lagi sebaiknya menggunakan bridging visa B itu. Namun demikian tetap kalau tidak mendesak sebaiknya disarankan untuk tidak keluar dari Australia karena saat mau kembali nantinya akan mengalami kesulitan karena adanya restriksi perjalanan yang masih berlangsung. Gitu ya Bu. Oke. Terima kasih banyak, thank you very much. Om Luki, Pak Luki, apakah ada kata-kata terakhir, ucapan terima kasih dari Indonesian Club Melbourne? Setelah ini kita akan foto bersama ya.
Sebelumnya Pak Faisal akan mengatakan sesuatu.
Oke, saya silakan Pak. Sebentar ya, di-unmute dulu ya. Sebentar. Oke.
Terima kasih Bu Vini, terima kasih Pak Luki. Thank you Mr. Henkel and Miss Linda. Maybe I will talk in Indonesian because we are addressing to Indonesian people here. Ini mungkin terkait dengan pelayanan KJRI saat ini, ya di masa COVID sementara ini kita masih tetap buka, terutama untuk yang masyarakat Indonesia yang mungkin ada keperluan terkait dengan pembuatan paspor, perpanjangan paspor. Namun sejalan dengan kebijakan pemerintah Victoria saat ini bahwa ada lockdown, ada restriksi tingkat 4 saat ini, kita juga menyesuaikan dengan waktu yang operasional kita. Jadi untuk penyerahan berkas itu kita bisa dari hari Senin, Rabu, dan Jumat. Dan mungkin kami juga perlu mengingatkan masyarakat juga untuk tetap memperhatikan masa berlaku paspor, jangan sampai expire, dan visa untuk tetap sesuai dengan kondisi agar tetap valid ya, jangan sampai expire sesuai dengan tadi yang disampaikan dalam paparan Mr. Henkel dan Miss Linda. Saya kira itu dari kami, mohon izin penjelasan tadi. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Faisal. Baik, terima kasih teman-teman sekalian, Bapak Ibu Saudara sekalian yang sudah menghadiri acara ini, dan terima kasih terutama ya, thank you terutama untuk Ibu Speaker Tutu Hatunewa yang sudah meluangkan waktunya untuk hadir di acara kami malam ini. Kemudian for both of the speakers, Bapak Red Henkel and Linda Fan, we thank you very much. Dan untuk closingnya ya, sebelum foto, closingnya akan disampaikan oleh Bapak Luki Kalonta. Kemudian kita foto bersama dan acara sudah berakhir.
Mau foto dulu sebelum buyar?
Oh baik, foto dulu. Oke. Okay. Alright, let's take a picture, everyone. If you can, please look at your camera. So do not look at yourself. Look at the camera. So your eyes will be straight forward. Ini saya yang foto atau IT nih? IT foto. ID foto ya, yang pakai laptop siapa, Brian or Phoebe? And I would also like to say a huge thank you for our IT team, Brian Anderson and Phoebe Wu. Big applause for you too. Kasih aba-aba dong, kasih 1, 2, 3 ya fotonya.
Oke, saya yang foto ya.
Oke.
Please turn on your camera for this photo session. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Let's, okay, in 3, 2, 1. Okay, once again. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Ya, terima kasih Pak. Terima kasih Phoebe. Om Luki mau ditambahkan untuk kata penutupnya?
Sebenarnya ya akan menyampaikan Ibu Teti ucapan terima kasih.
Ucapan katanya Pak Luki aja nggak apa-apa. Ya udah Bu Teti, udah di spotlight. Silakan tinggal unmute,
Iya, ayo dong Om Luki. Aku kan tadi udah, ayo dong.
Okay,
Om Luki.
Oke. Aku unmute ya. Sebentar Om, belum di-unmute. Tolong di-unmute dulu.
Udah?
Iya, silakan Pak.
Okay, on behalf of the Indonesian Club Melbourne, we would like to say thank you to Red and Linda, and special to Ibu Konsul Jenderal kita, Ibu Spika Tutu Hatunewa, dan semua yang sudah ikut malam hari ini, and to everyone who already join us for this session, because I think this is important to everyone. And also to Buset, Indonesian Magazine, dan Konsulat Jenderal Republik Indonesia yang sudah bekerja sama untuk mensukseskan acara ini. Sekali lagi, thank you very much and God bless you.
Terima kasih.